Gold isn't worth anything unless we believe it is. It's just a metal. Today, Europe is suffering from pessimism, a lack of trust in politics and a lack of confidence in the economy, which means people want to save and not spend, even if they have the money. 60 billion euros each month. That's how much the European Central Bank will spend in its new bond buying program. It's called QE, Quantitative Easing. Basically, it's printing money. Mario Draghi, the Italian president of the European Central Bank, said the bank would buy more than 1 trillion euros in assets, including government and private sector bonds, by September next year. Draghi is trying to raise Eurozone inflation to just below 2%. By getting more cash into Europe's banks, Draghi hopes the banks will lend more money to governments and businesses. The governments and businesses will spend the money on investment and infrastructure projects, increasing consumer spending and reducing unemployment. There is no guarantee the strategy will work.
What we observe on the markets since the decision was taken is that the markets reacted positively. So I have no reason to believe now that it is not going to work. But of course, we are using tools that were conceived at a time where we had 3% growth in the EU and where we had the necessity to tackle possible inflation, and now we have no growth and we are going in the direction of deflation. So nobody can be sure that this instrument is going to function.
The ECB has used all the usual tools available in monetary policy. It didn't work. So I hope this last move going into quantitative easing will work it, or at least help to release a bit the economy of Europe.
The ECB has now taken the decision to print money, to put more money in the economy because they thought there's a lack of investments. Our evaluation is different. We think there's a lot of money circulating, enough money circulating, and there's no need for putting much more money in the economy.
Quantitative easing we're very skeptical about because basically you don't give money for public investment, you give money to the banks. And they just might flood the financial markets, it might create new asset price bubbles. What we need now is direct credit from the ECB for public investment.
The banks are not compelled to lend their new cash. They can sit on it or circulate it relatively safely in financial assets, taking the profits from each transaction. The average citizen will not really benefit and unemployment will not be reduced. Technically, Draghi isn't supposed to be concerned about employment, just inflation.
If inflation kicks in, the money on your saving account is worth less. You get lower interest rates, which should be an incentive for people to invest in the economy, to dispense more, to purchase more. In that way, they would increase inflation again. For me, I'm not convinced that everyone should become an expert in asset management and in options. The fact that people have money in their savings account is enough. It's also up to the banking sector to make sure that the money that is in these savings account reaches the real economy.
As Europe's economic crisis continues, political capital falls, public trust becomes exhausted. Economic chaos will lead to civil disorder.
Citizens cannot understand an agenda that over and over again only speaks about the decimal points of deficit, debt, and that doesn't deliver any sort of solution. So I think this is a moment for being rational and saying, okay, this didn't work, so let's adjust what can be adjusted.
Quantitative easing alone isn't the answer, because it's not just a question of needing more cash to stimulate the economy. These structural reforms that many have talked about, in some countries they've been enacted more and others less, that needs to go on as well.
If you look 5 years behind, you will see, of course, we muddled through in the crisis. It's not brilliant, it's not a big vision, it was very pragmatic, but we had no tools. So we have made huge steps. In my opinion, the key challenge for the next 5 years is to get the citizens again on board.
The original meaning of the word credit is to believe or to trust. Our financial and political systems only work if we believe they have value. Money has no value at all unless we believe it does. Political agreement is dead without trust.
The basic trust is for someone with cash to invest that cash in a business, the entrepreneur, the business, whether it's a small enterprise, a family enterprise, or whether it's a multinational company. The question is in which environment will they invest their money, thinking that that will be in the environment to grow.
Quantitative easing can only work if banks and the consuming public spend the money. They could just buy gold with the cash, which will not stimulate the economy or produce employment.
QE is easy enough to get into. Getting back out of it is going to be more complex. How do you see that working?
I don't believe anyone really sees how that's going to be. We see that in the US it's not such an easy issue. Also in the UK, the expectations now, what will happen to lending rates from the central bank. All of these decisions for any central banker are quite difficult. I don't know who has the answer. I'm not even certain that the European Central Bank has a clear vision. I believe that everyone is in the process of reacting to events and doing the best that they can.
If QE fails, then there's no weapon left against the depression. We have observed this in Japan now. They have made QE, but it had no tangible impact on economic growth. So I think then they have to face it. That's what we're saying for years now. Then we need really fresh money for public investment, and it has to come from the rich via a fair tax system. We are currently also discussing tax havens here in the European Parliament, and secondly by the ECB, instead of pumping ever more liquidity into banks.
The monetary policy was supposed to be enough, but the crisis was too hard, so the interest rate was lowered till the limit. Other instruments were used, but in fact it was not enough, so we needed to use also the margin of maneuver of countries that can still afford it, and Germany is one of them. They should boost a little bit their budget so that they create some sort of oxygen for the economy.
Many in Europe take the view that the ECB does what Germany tells it to do. But Mario Draghi is not a king. He is first amongst equals. Many other central bankers supported QE. Draghi said the decision to launch QE was supported by a large majority of the ECB's governing council, so large we didn't need to take a vote. The ECB is truly independent, at least as far as decision-making goes. The fluid political factors impacting on ECB decisions are just part of the calculations. So why does Germany get the blame for whatever the ECB does? And why does Germany look weakened when the ECB goes against the German position?
I'm used to say the Germans are always wrong. If they lead, they are wrong because, of course, they are former Nazi and they want the hegemony. And if they don't, they are cowards who don't want to take their responsibility. All this is unfair.
Germany was too visible, leading the European agenda. Economic power, political power, in practice, made them the leaders of Europe, even if they didn't assume this role. And so they were fighting for their own interest, but they were dragging the whole European agenda behind them.
I think that we need more German leadership, and I don't believe that they're losing their influence. They're simply not realizing the positive power that they have. It's not fully being exploited.
The size and the weight of Germany is a reality. Without the Germans, we would have not survived with the euro. So we can at least say Dankeschön.
The ECB has acted now because the Eurozone is suffering from deflation. Deflation affects an economy by decreasing the velocity of money or the number of commercial transactions more or less permanently. This leads to the emergence of a serious contraction in the supply of money, a liquidity trap, and the economy stalls. Investment stops.
Let's be honest, deflation is like cholesterol. You have good and bad deflation. And there's no strict link between deflation, inflation and a recession. Studies show that much more recessions were linked to inflation situations than deflation situations. By deflation, purchasing powers of the citizens grows. The fact that now the energy prices are low means that people have more money to spend on other things.
Deflation isn't always bad, but the risks for Europe from deflation could be permanent if not addressed quickly.
Who benefits from this policy?
Certainly, those who benefited are the banks. They were rescued at the expense of the taxpayers. Secondly, wealthy people benefit. Their share of income has increased, while for the majority it has decreased.
The money that is printed now, that is injected in the market, it benefits only the banking sector, the financial institutions, and not households, and not families, and not retired people.
So why doesn't the European Central Bank finance Europe's governments directly?
It's not allowed. So the ECB has to stay in the framework of its mandate. And it is not there to finance the public debt of the states. It is not there to give money. And I'm not sure that it will not be moral hazard. It is clear that what we need is not just liquidity in the system. It is much more to make sure that we change the structures, that we boost innovation, that we change the labor markets, the education. So there is a lot to do at the national level, and it is in the hands of the member states. I would not rely only on the ECB. It would be unfair. The ECB is there to make the monetary policy, not to rule Europe.
But there is an alternative. In their article Print Less but Transfer More, Mark Blyth and Eric Lonergan wrote in the Foreign Affairs Journal about why central banks should give money directly to the people. Helicopter drops would require the banks to print much less money by depositing the funds directly into millions of individual accounts, spurring spending immediately. Over the long term, they could reduce dependence on the banking system for growth and reverse the trend of rising inequality. The only real question, they say, is why no government has tried them. It's time for something new.